Welcome everyone to the next episode of The Editor is In. And today we are again talking about reviewing papers for academic journal articles. My name is Anthony James and I'm the Editor-in-Chief of Marriage and Family Review. Again, welcome to today's episode. Today we are talking about the value of being a reviewer. And to introduce herself, let me please pass the mic to today's guest.
Hello, everyone. My name is Joyce Serido, and I am an associate professor in family social science at the University of Minnesota. As of January 2019, I am also the editor-in-chief of the Journal of Family and Economic Issues. And I want to thank you, Dr. James, for having me here to talk about an article or a topic that is really very passionate, that I'm passionate about, and I hope to convey that information as well.
Yes, absolutely. Well, thanks for joining us. As we talked about before we started here, it's, I think, valuable to have people hear different editors and their perspectives on these topics, which I think we all share some passions about. So as with previous editions, I have provided today's guest with a list of 5 questions. The goal is to be as conversational as possible, but these questions, of course, will guide our conversation. So let's go ahead and get started. And the first question for Dr. Serido is, what is the value of reviewing from the perspective of the scholar? Of course, we want to acknowledge that there's value to us as editors, but what is the value of reviewing for the scholar?
Well, let me start by saying I am delighted to have an opportunity to talk about this from the perspective of the scholar, because clearly as an editor, and I know you share this as well, it's challenging to find good reviewers because it's an investment in time. It takes away from your other activities. And I know, myself included, there are times when I just want to focus on my own work. And so I am grateful to reviewers. That's why I acknowledge that. Yes, I do. But I want to make it really clear that I was brought up at a time when the purpose of reviewing was to strengthen my own work. And I credit my advisor at the time, my graduate advisor, with instilling that belief in me. Basically, he would ask me to read his reviews that he received from his submissions. And what I learned is, a lot of people put articles out there that aren't perfect. And that encouraged me to try my own voice out. The other thing it helped me to see is how to strengthen my work, not only in what I said about the topics that I studied, but also to understand other perspectives. So I don't know about you, but I like to think that I'm very clear in everything I write as an author. And so it's frustrating when a reviewer comes back and says, this isn't clear. I don't know where you're going with this. And it's very hard sometimes to understand their perspective. So I would say that the number one thing, the goal of reviewing, the value in reviewing as an author is to improve your own scholarship. So let me give you some examples of ways that happened for me. I have my own graduate students review articles as a way for them to feel more confident about their statement. So if you're a new author, if you're a new scholar, you're not sure if you don't understand someone's writing because it's a topic that's new to you, not familiar to you, or if because perhaps it's a method that you're unfamiliar with. And so I don't know about you again, but the imposter syndrome in me comes out and says, I don't think I'm qualified to give a review. And that's an unfortunate thing for a young scholar to feel, because the way we get to be a stronger scholar is by putting it out there and having people respond to us. So the number one point to a reviewer is, if you want to strengthen your own scholarship, take a gander at other people's scholarship, review it, see what's clear to you, see how they said things, because it will point out to you some of the areas in your own work that you can improve upon, or maybe point out those areas where you are exceptionally good, in which case do more of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for sharing that. But if I can go back just a second, and this relates to the second question about, your training, how does one's training impact, the extent to which they review for academic journals? If I'm hearing you correctly, your mentor has offered a different way of doing this. So your mentor didn't ask you to review a paper that he was requested to review. Rather, your mentor allowed you to read the reviews he received on a paper he submitted. Am I understanding you correctly?
That is absolutely correct, which I thought was the most powerful learning experience that he could offer to me. Because of course, as a graduate student, I thought he was amazing. He was the best writer. His scholarship was so clear. He was so accomplished. And the fact that he was willing to share reviews, which were not necessarily all that complimentary about his work, did a couple of things. It helped me to see the reviewer not as my enemy, but as someone who truly was interested in improving my work. And it made me see my advisor not as someone who walked on water, but as someone who also continued to learn and improve their scholarship as they went forward. So yes, he gave me a very valuable lesson in both the value of reading reviews, the value in providing strong reviews, even if they were critical, and the humility in saying everyone can learn from another scholar.
Yeah, absolutely. I share a similar story, although different process. Once I was deputy editor of Family Theory and Review, I had a chance of processing a manuscript by a couple of scholars that that are giants in the field, right? That, we go through our training and we're looking like, oh my gosh, that's a god there, without any disrespect to, anyone's religious or faith beliefs. So when I saw the reviews that this scholar received back, I was like, oh wow, they actually get critiqued like I do, and that did help me in overcoming that wall that's there for many people who try to write, of course, one of which is imposter syndrome, which you mentioned earlier. So thanks for sharing that. I hadn't even thought of that as a way to impact the training. So kudos to your mentor for that. And so that's one process. Can you talk a little bit about how scholars may learn to be good reviewers?
Okay, I can share with you that what I do with my own graduate students is involve them in the review process, meaning whether it's my work that I ask them to critique, or whether it's I've been invited to be a reviewer and I've accepted, I will encourage them to discuss with me and provide their comments as well. And I do that because it does help them practice how to verbalize the concerns that they're sensing with an article. But we only practice in the ways to communicate in a scientifically strong manner. That's not something that you get easily. You have to practice that. It's a muscle that you develop. And so that is the second thing that I invite young people, young scholars to be reviewers on, because they need to practice it to get better. And by doing that in a sort of a mentoring way, meaning they don't have to be right, they don't have to have exactly the right words, but each time they do it, they become more empowered, more clear, and they develop skills that they wouldn't receive, okay, other than the hard reviews they get themselves. So I think it's also a wonderful way to help young scholars understand why reviewers say some of the things they do. And it helps them see that it's not a personal, I don't think reviewers are out there to demean other scholars. Generally, I don't believe that's true. I believe they're trying to genuinely say, this is not clear. This needs more work. This needs some more effort on your part. And I think by taking on that responsibility as a reviewer, scholars are learning that process to say, this is not a critique of you personally. This is part of my job as a scholar, to recognize that there's a scientific rigor that you have to demonstrate. And that's what differentiates science, in my view, scholarly writing, from opinion ed pieces or popular pieces. It's that you're being held to a standard that demands a higher level of rigor.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks for sharing that. And that sort of shift that comes in, I'm assuming, the mind of, this process, you sort of feel it. I don't know if that makes sense to you, but I've experienced it as being a new, reviewer. I now, have mentees that I'm asking, my colleagues, when they ask me to review, I say, well, I can't review it, but can you assign it to my grad student, and I will review with them. And of course, for grad students, it's like, let me find every little detail. And then they see my review, because my process is I have them review it independently, just say, give me all your feedback you can, and then I'll show you mine. I don't want to tarnish them, or I guess, I don't know if that's the right word, but their process. I want them to just do it naturally. And then I show them my review, and it's usually, a little more concise, doesn't get to the APA things, and it's the overall and so that process, I also see them transfer, because I was at that same point at one time as well. And so it does sort of help over time. You sort of learn what editors are looking for, and sometimes that can shift from journal to journal, editor to editor, whatever the case may be. So thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, the other thing that I love when you talk about that is that level of understanding. It does evolve. And it's a wonderful thing, because you don't expect a new scholar to understand the nuances of the interpretation. And I can remember, again, early in my career, seeing people who said, this is what's important, or this is the thing to focus on. And I'm thinking, how did you know that that was the important point? Well, part of it is experience. I've seen enough of this to know that this is new and fresh. This we've already seen, and we'd expect to see that there, but this is new. And you can't get that. You can't get there in a step, or in a paper, or in a career. You get there over a career. And so for me, I am sad when young scholars say, I can't do reviews, or I don't want to do reviews, or I have too many other things to do, because I think they're missing an important opportunity to learn how to be better at their craft.
Absolutely. It's an art and a science, literally. And over time, you develop those tricks and of the trade, so to speak, and develop your own, tricks within that. And so, yes, absolutely. But if we can pivot just a tad, so are there barriers to becoming reviewers based on issues of diversity? And I'll just leave the question, and I'll allow you to respond unless it's not clear.
Well, let me say that I interpret diversity in a number of ways. And that could be based on your discipline, your disciplinary focus. It can be based on your just experience as a scholar, your name known in the field, that sort of thing. I am very grateful to be the editor of a journal that truly is multidisciplinary. That's both a curse and a challenge, that may be very clear. The challenge is just about anything that's written can be considered an important domain for a family. Therefore, I am looking for diverse scholars from a diverse set of disciplines to look at the content from their own perspective. And that lets me understand how important a topic is, how relevant a topic is, and what is the best fit for the largest audience. And again, mine is families and economics, so it's a pretty broad area, especially at this time. I would say that for the most part, at least at this point in time, I am pretty open to diversity in any way, shape, or form. And truthfully, I don't think I even know it. Meaning, when I look for a scholar to review a work, it's based on previous publications, okay, that I may have seen. More so today than in the past, when it might have been, these are the people in my circle of influence. So I think that's a really important thing. And I would say that if anything, our scholarship is becoming more broad in terms of who I invite to review. That said, I would say the topics, okay, in that regard, that's where the lack of diversity may come in. So let me explain what I mean by that. Not only is the journal that I work with very multidisciplinary, it's also international. And so I receive a lot of manuscripts from developing countries. And the problems that they face and the issues that they're tackling are absolutely fascinating. Okay. But how do I find reviewers to do a fair job in evaluating the scholarship? And so if that's a diversity issue, then that's an issue that I face. How do I get new scholarship from a developing country perspective to be adequately and accurately reviewed so that the work can see the light of day?
Absolutely. I've had a conversation on this podcast in a previous edition about, marriage and family review also being an international focus. And there are times that a manuscript is submitted from a place where it may be a Gmail account, and there is probably this bias within me that I'm used to seeing EDU. So I don't know the level of this scholar because I can't place them within a particular institution or organization. And it may be on a cultural group that I'm not very familiar with. And so then I have to find people who are generally good in the area that they are submitting about. I then have to think about the topic, is there a topical expert? But then I have to find that cultural expert. And I usually always tailor that review request to say, hey, I'm not familiar with this culture, and I want to make sure we uphold scientific standards. So I really need your feedback on, is the way this problem is being framed, addressed, the findings, are they in line with the culture, cultural beliefs? And that is a challenge because I'm in some ways going in blind, right? And that's been an interesting experience to have. And so how do I develop a pool of reviewers, right, for the many cultures that are exist in our world that about family. So I appreciate you bringing that up. And along the same lines, if it is a scholar or a younger scholar, a newer scholar, we have the chance to rate reviews and or score reviews in our system that we use to process manuscripts. I'm not sure if your journal does that or not, but how do you, or what, I guess the first question should be, do you allow junior scholars to review? And if they submit a particularly bad review, do you give them another chance? Do you say that's it? Can you talk a little bit about your process for those types of decisions?
I am laughing to myself because I sometimes think that the younger scholars, the emerging scholars are, I don't want to say better reviewers, but they're more thorough in their reviews than some of the more senior scholars are. Part of that is because perhaps the senior scholars have been there, done that, seen that. It's less new and fresh to them. So to your point, I'm not looking to cut scholars out. I'm not looking to say you're a crappy reviewer, you're out of here. More likely, what I'm interested in doing is developing the reviewer. Now, this is not something that my journal does yet, but it's something that I'm pushing to happen. And that is giving the reviewers the recommendation that I make. So I think it's really important for a reviewer to see not only the decision that the editor made with their reviews considered, but also to see the reviews of the other reviewers. It's an incredibly powerful learning experience, because I know when I used to get my first pieces back, I checked to make sure that I wasn't way off the mark, which was a good thing, wasn't it? Right? You sit there and say, oh, okay, I was on point there. I didn't see that. Oh, I could see why somebody said that. But it's a way of helping you, calibrate to understand what a good review is, how reviews are used in the decision-making process, and the kinds of things you can say to encourage the author. At the same time, be very specific about a particular shortcoming or something they need to address. So I generally do not say, this was not a very good review, that's it, they're done. Typically, I will seek extra reviewers. In that case, if I have a new scholar, I may ask, instead of 2 reviewers, I may have 3 ask, so that I have a chance to ensure that the author, that's my ultimate goal, is provide the author enough information to strengthen their work. And so if a particular review is not strong enough, I have others, and the combined effect is what I think makes a good review.
Absolutely. No, I'm glad you mentioned that. I did the same thing too. I can't remember which journal it was at this point, but they would share all of the decision with all of the reviews at the bottom, and I go and try to figure out, okay, which one is mine, and see if there was overlaps in what we said. Did the editor possibly highlight something I said? And there's been times where I've seen them and wasn't even sure which reviewer I was. I'm like, man, it seems like we're saying similar things, so that feels good. But to your point as well, yes, it certainly can be the case that junior scholars, because they're so detailed and there's more at stake, so to speak, that they give a more thorough review. And just for the record, it also can be just such a dud when you have a big name researcher that gives you a 2-sentence review, and you're like, really? I was expecting, the world with your review, and you gave me, 3 sentences. So that happens as well. So I'm glad you jogged my memory on that. So
it's funny though. I have to just comment on when you get reviews that are just reject, not good enough. I've seen this before. I think to myself, as an author, that doesn't help me get any better. So taking the time for me has become sort of a personal mission, and I really do strive not just to get good reviews and a new pool of reviewers, but also to provide feedback to the author that synthesizes what the reviewers are saying and points the author in a direction that makes sense for their work. So I'm sure you have had cases where 3 reviews, 3 different perspectives. Oh my goodness, what do you do with this? But that's not the reviewer's problem, that's my problem. But it's a fun one to have, because it really stretches my own capacity to think as a scholar, to think of the field, and to think of how to strengthen the work.
Yeah, and it also gets us to that place that I know many scholars have argued for, but space constraints have limited opportunities for, which is, why not say both perspectives? That's what the discussion is for, is to say, hey, here's one way of thinking about this, here's another, and that other may be a totally different theoretical approach, because we know using different theories can give you different outcomes or different processes, and that's important. And hopefully, as we learn more about online submission and have a little more space in journals, we can possibly get to that place to say, using this particular theory, you're going to come up with this possible answer. But if you switch that, or you switch this variable, or you switch this sample, you're going to come up with this. And that's the type of nuance, because as you're, I think, alluding to, the reviews are to strengthen the science, because the science is what guides the field, and that guides practice and policy and all sorts of things that are important to real people. And so hopefully what this opens up is those types of opportunities. Of course, unless I'm misunderstanding you, but I think we're on the same page. Yes, absolutely. So, well, we've actually come to the end of our questions. It goes fast, but I wanted to offer you an opportunity for any last minute thoughts that you may have had.
I would like to just extend my thank you to those who choose to do the reviews. I know that there are more academic institutions that are placing value on the service made to the field. I think we went away from that for a while, but I want to thank reviewers for taking the time. And I want to encourage young authors, young scholars to volunteer. I mean, I've had a few requests from scholars to say, I would like to be considered for your review board. I would like to review for this journal. And I am grateful for the offer. And I certainly am going to take the opportunity to encourage them to develop under me. So please, if you're out there thinking, I don't know enough to do it, it's not my topic, it's not my scholar, jump in. It's the way to learn, and your work will be so much better for it.
Yes, absolutely. I would agree 100%. And I would like to thank you for joining us and providing your perspective on this topic. It is certainly valuable, and we appreciate it. To our audience, you've been listening to The Editor's Inn with our special guest, Dr. Serido, and yours truly, Dr. Anthony James, Jr. Today's podcast will be available on our website, where you also find a short bio on Dr. Serido and a link to her journal. So thanks so much for joining us, and everyone have a wonderful day.
Thank you so much. Bye.